Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Goleta City Council meeting of September the 2nd, 2025. If you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Here.
Councilmember Kiriakou.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Here.
And Mayor Prodi.
Here. Okay, at this time, we'll introduce our translator. If you'll come up to the microphone. Oh, is it on?
Buenas tardes, tenemos interpretación al español disponible. Si alguien prefiere, aquí tengo auriculares. Good evening, we have interpretation into Spanish. If anybody prefers, I have headsets over here. Thank you, gracias.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'll have a report from Mr. Rosen from closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. So for the one item on the closed session agenda that was read into the record this evening, there is no reportable action.
Okay, got it. Okay, this time we'll have public forum on anything that's not on our agenda this evening and that's relevant to our city. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, anyone on the webinar who wishes to speak to a non-agenda item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I do have Robert Saeda. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Good evening.
Again, something for you to seriously consider. I was deeply disappointed to see that the curb ramps along Kyriel are being replaced. I know it's quote unquote to meet ADA guidelines, but I bring to your attention the rest of the sidewalks out here in El Encanto that are uplifted by by the trees are not ADA compliant either. And in fact, the sidewalks are more out of compliance with the ADA than the ramps that you're replacing. If you doubt me, put yourself in a wheelchair and try going through the neighborhoods over here. It's nearly impossible to do it in a comfortable manner from a wheelchair. You've replaced the ramp out on Evergreen by the playground there a few years ago when you did that street. And now when it rains heavily, you have a puddle right in that ramp that sits there for a day or two. And when it's raining, there's water flowing all the way across the sidewalk to where you're gonna get wet if you're in just tennis shoes. So I understand ADA compliancy, but there's other things in the city that are more out of whack with your ADA compliancy than the ramps that are not busted, they're not broken up, they're not a trip hazard. You can roll a wheelchair through them easily and all that. And I'd just like you to consider that ADA compliancy is more than just crossing a street. The second thing I'd like to mention is when you're coming up Glen Annie from Hollister, over our newly repaved and fantastic area of Glen Annie up to the freeway. Have you guys noticed that there's like 3 areas that are probably a foot to 5 feet in length that you see the old pavement and not the new stuff anymore? It's kind of ridiculous that we're paying all this money to make our streets look good when they don't even last a year. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I do have Andrew Schur. If you'll please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes. Andrew, if you'll unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I just wanted to bring attention, I'm sorry, just one second here, to something I found about this morning. AB 90 from the state legislature is bringing so the Assembly is bringing to the table a bill that would require community colleges to plan overnight parking programs for housing insecure students. The fact that this bill exists shows how urgent the student housing crisis has become. And I think that it's an interesting point that needs to be discussed. Community college students and UC students often share housing. And it just leads to a very insecure environment where I think we could do a lot better. So I think it's an interesting point that I think should be discussed further. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have no more speakers for public forum.
Okay, then I will close public forum at this point and move on to city manager. Do you have a report or?
Sure, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. No changes to the
Oh,
agenda,
yeah.
but I do have 2 announcements,
Okay,
if that's
thank you
okay.
for that.
Just announcements of upcoming events.
Okay.
First one, 2 events upcoming. First one is this Saturday morning, Coffee and Community. This event is at the Camino Real Marketplace. It's at the kind of seating plaza out in front of Anna's Bakery. Actually, it's in front of a lot of businesses. But there's a seating plaza out there. We're hoping for good weather. Mayor Perotti, Mayor Pro Tem Stuart Kasdan, and some Goleta staff will be there to listen to the community, have coffee, have some donuts, take questions, do that kind of thing. That event is from 9 to 11 this Saturday at the outdoor plaza in front of Anna's Bakery. There will be Spanish interpretation available and also coloring for the kids. And then another cool event is coming up on Sunday at Ice in Paradise, a facility that I myself went to recently for the first time. I've been here 3 years now, 3 years today. It's been great, but had not been there. Wonderful facility. So we're partnering with them. The Goleta Valley Library Book Van will be there 1:30 to 3:30 on Sunday. It's library card sign-up month, so you can sign up for a library card while you're there, and you would get free admission for ice skating for that time with your library card. So that is 1:30 to 3:30 on Sunday, and there's additional information on our website.
Great.
And that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, consent calendar.
Yes, that is item A1, approval of the city council meeting minutes of July 15, 2025, and the special city council meeting minutes of July 21, 2025. Item A2, Title 17 zoning amendments to ordinance to ensure consistency with general plan, coastal land use plan updates, second reading and CEQA exemption. Conduct second reading by title only and waive further reading of ordinance 25 next in order entitled, An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, amending Title 17 zoning of the Goleta Municipal Code to implement general plan amendments to ensure consistency with state planning law and determine that the amendments to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, case number 250001-ORD. Item A3, response to the 2024-25 Santa Barbara County Grand Jury Report entitled, Santa Barbara County South Coast Housing Crisis, a Call to Action. Item A4, Genesis Evacuation Software Mapping Memorandum of an Agreement with the County of Santa Barbara Office of Emergency Management. Item A5, Approval of Land and Water Conservation Fund grant applications for the Stowe Grove Park Next Phase and Nectarine Park renovation projects. And item A6, approve the plans and specifications and award of construction contract for the San Jose Creek Multipurpose Path Project.
Thank you. Council wish to pull any item from consent? Mayor Pro Tem, I see your,
Yeah, not necessarily to pull, but just to
Just a comment?
discuss
Okay.
the A6.
if you'd like to make your comment now.
Oh, I guess I had,
Which item is it?
this is the San Jose Creek,
So that's
A6.
A6. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and I guess I see Autumn out there. And I was curious if, I gathered this is kind of a milestone of sorts, and perhaps we could talk about where we stand. I was particularly curious, how the price that we see here, this 24,000, compares. We've always heard bad news as far as the engineer's estimate. How did this one do? And just any other about the status, the timeline, when will it be done, and so forth?
Well, that'll be more than a comment, so we'll have to pull it. So let's pull A6.
Oh.
Come on up, Autumn.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I think I have the list of items. So, yes, it is a big milestone for San Jose Creek Multipurpose Path Project. It's very exciting. The project is on the consent calendar for a construction award tonight, and construction would start here at the, towards the end of the year, next month or so. Can you repeat your questions?
Well, for those who are less familiar, what will it do?
Okay, so we will construct about a almost 2-mile bike path that connects from our existing county trail, and it will cross the 217, the 101, and UPRR all the way up through to Calle Real. So it is a big connection for the city. We don't have a pedestrian-only undercrossing for any of those facilities. So that's exciting. Pedestrian and bicycle.
And what's the timetable? When will it be done, did you say?
I believe it will be done in 18 months.
In 18 months. So in 18 months, those people living in Old Town are going to be able to finally get to Calle Real without having to risk life and limb?
I hope there's no risk for life and limb, but yes.
Well, the e-bikes, but that's another story. And how did the costs turn out?
So we were successful in our bid opening, and it did come in $4 million under our engineer's estimate. So I think that is actually attributed to the design team and our construction environment that we're in right now. It was highly competitive, and we win in that result. I will remind, there's parts of the project that were pulled out, so this doesn't include the UP portion, since that was removed, since it's on a separate track. So there's still construction costs considered, which the staff report shows you the whole amount.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Other council members have any questions?
And Madam Mayor, I would just like to add one minor point. I assume you'll put this back on consent and take it up with the rest of the consent items. There's 4 recommendations there, A through D. On recommendation C, there is a very small typo. The number amount, which is authorizing the amount for change orders, is $2,481,675,070. There's a comma there instead of a period, so just making that clear. It's not billions of dollars. That's and 70 cents.
That's good to know. Do we have any speaker that would like to speak on that one?
Yes, if any member of the public on the Zoom webinar wishes to speak to any consent item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I'm seeing none.
Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve. As amended, A6.
I'll move approval as amended.
I'll second.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, council members, do please lock in your votes. Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Carriaco,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Parodi.
Aye. Okay, passes. It's unanimous. Okay. Moving on to presentation.
That's going to be item B1, a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, declaring September 2025 as National Preparedness Month in Goleta.
I believe we have Director Joanne Plummer and Jason Levy coming up to receive this honor. Well deserved. Read the proclamation. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, declaring September 2025 as National Preparedness Month. Whereas National Preparedness Month creates an important opportunity for the whole community of the City of Goleta to prepare their homes, businesses, and our community for any type of emergency, including natural or human-caused disasters. And whereas investing in the preparedness of ourselves, our families, businesses, and communities can reduce fatalities and economic devastation in our community and in our nation. And whereas the City of Goleta Emergency Services Division, with the support from all city departments and in coordination with the Santa Barbara County Office of Emergency Management, Santa Barbara County Operational Area Partners, the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and other federal, state, local, and volunteer organizations is working to enhance public engagement in emergency preparedness and to educate individuals on how to take proactive steps. And whereas the whole community of the City of Goleta, including individuals, businesses, government employees, and elected officials, to recognize the importance of emergency preparedness. Whereas emergency preparedness is the responsibility of every community member of the City of Goleta, and the whole community is urged to make preparedness a priority and work together as a team to ensure that individuals, families, and neighbors are prepared for disasters and emergencies of any type. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Goleta as follows, that September 2025 is hereby proclaimed as National Preparedness Month in the City of Goleta. Please passed and approved and adopted this second day of September 2025, signed by myself, Mayor Paula Perotti. And I'd like to present this to the both of you. I'm sure that Marcos would probably want to, there we go, want to take some pictures and maybe pictures with everyone too. There you go. All right, that probably looks really good. 1, 2, 3, and then yeah. You know, hold it. There you go. Really? Yeah.
All right, here we go. Ready? Big smiles. 1, 2. Perfect.
If you would like to both say something, please do.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for recognizing September as National Preparedness Month. I know you're not here to listen to me, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to our Emergency Services Coordinator, Jason Levy.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Council, thank you for this proclamation, which encourages our whole community to take proactive steps toward preparedness. When individuals, families, residents, businesses, and government commit to readiness, we strengthen our collective resilience against potential disasters. In alignment with the city's strategic plan objective and the general plan safety element focused on education and awareness, the Emergency Services Division has refreshed our public website and is launching a fall training campaign. The website update makes preparedness resources more accessible, actionable, and user-friendly. Part 1 of the new website is now live to the public. As part of our fall campaign, we're also offering a series of public classes, including multiple sessions of the Community Disaster Education Workshops and a new cohort of basic Community Emergency Response Team CERT trainings. These classes will be available beginning tomorrow on our website. We are also exploring opportunities with online public education courses as another avenue to reach our community and reduce barriers to learning. Finally, to spotlight this month's preparedness initiatives, we're proud to present a new video that captures the spirit of our efforts. This video is being released across all city channels, and we're pleased to share it with you now. Hi, I'm Jason Levy, the Emergency Services Coordinator in Goleta. September is National Preparedness Month, a perfect time to do a few basic things that will make a difference when a disaster strikes. First, make a family plan. Know how you'll contact each other and where you'll meet if you get separated. Build an emergency kit. Pack items such as water, non-perishable food, a flashlight, batteries, first aid supplies, and any medications you need. Include copies of important documents. And don't forget things like phone chargers, extra clothes, and remember your pet's needs as well. Stay informed. Sign up for emergency alerts by going to readysbc.org. For more information, go to our website at cityofgoleta.org/preparedness. A ready community is a prepared community, and it all starts with you. Thanks, Goleta.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you again for your support and commitment to keeping Goleta prepared in case of an emergency.
Thank you so much. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, if any member of the public on the Zoom webinar wishes to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I am seeing none, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That'll take us to item B2, a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, recognizing September 2025 as Lemon Month.
Tony Vallejo, are you coming up? Your chair, along with a couple others?
We're not making me come up here alone. No, I have it right here. Thank you. You guys are yeah, let's get the lemon front and center. I mean, he's the star here.
Say it over here. I don't know, hopefully they're getting everybody in here. Okay. Okay. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, recognizing September 2025 as Lemon Month. Whereas the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce from Goleta to Carpinteria will be holding the 32nd Goleta Lemon Festival on September 27 and 28, 2025 at Gersh Park in Goleta. And whereas in an effort to celebrate the Goleta Lemon Festival, the community will honor Goleta's heritage and lemony specials and the week leading up to the event. Whereas local shops and restaurants are encouraged to feature lemon-inspired menu items and lemony specials. Whereas community members are asked to wear their vintage Lemon Festival t-shirts with the past, from the past, or just wear yellow to school and work every day. Whereas the Lemon Festival will showcase more than 20 types of lemon food and merchandise while benefiting dozens of local nonprofits. Now, Therefore, we resolve that on this second day of September, the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, does hereby proclaim September 1 through the 30th, 2025, as Lemon Month in the City of Goleta, approved the second day of September, 2025, and signed by myself, Mayor Paula Perotti. Yay! So maybe get a picture of all of it, and then all of us over there. But we need to wear our sunglasses.
Yeah.
We need to get everybody in front of the podium because
Yes.
they do all the work, so I might get.
Do you, okay, a group picture them, and then everybody?
Ethan, buddy.
All right, here we go. Ready? Big lemony smiles. 1, 2. Perfect.
Okay, then we're going to take a picture with everybody else. Okay.
All right, we over here? Okay.
You want to do it there?
I love this picture because no one's going to look at us at all. The pressure's off. Come on over here. We're going to put this soul.
No, we put the glasses on.
You're the man in the middle.
Come on, Roman. Make sure I don't block the bear.
There she is.
Where do you want me?
Oh, my God.
All right, let's squeeze in a little bit more.
No pun
Yeah,
intended.
yeah, lemons don't like to be. All right, here we go. Ready? 1, 2. Awesome.
I do. You are burning that right. Right? You're fixing watch out, watch your step. All right.
He really wants that.
I'm going to make this quick before our lemon has heat stroke. So. All right. Madam Mayor, members of the council, as you know, my name is Tony Vallejo. I'm a local CPA and proud chair of the Goleta Lemon Festival. I'm honored to be here once again on behalf of the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce to celebrate this beloved Goleta tradition. The Goleta Lemon Festival continues to be one of the largest festivals on the South Coast, an event that captures the very zest of our community. Remember, I didn't write this. I wouldn't be this clever. Year after year, families, friends, and neighbors gather to celebrate Goleta's history, culture, and vibrant spirit, and this year will be just as refreshing. We're excited to welcome back favorite traditions like the pie eating contest, Safety Street, tying into National Preparedness Month, and lemon-inspired treats, along with expanded activities for all ages, live music and performances from 2 stages, and the Goleta Fall Classic Car Show. No lemons on the lot, just polished classics. They all hit, people. Bear with me. Come on. The Goleta Lemon Festival is also the Chamber's largest annual event and the ripest fundraiser for more than 30 local nonprofit organizations who take part in making this festival so appealing. Sorry. We are deeply grateful for the City of Goleta's continued partnership, and we thank the city staff and police for their support in keeping the festival safe, family-friendly, and welcoming for all. And of course, none of this would be possible without our volunteers, the heart and soul of the Goleta Lemon Festival, from the dedicated committee members, some of who are joining us tonight, to the hundreds of students and adult volunteers, the secret squeeze behind our success. Especially the ones who put on lemon costumes. We can't wait to see you at Gersh Park for another unforgettable Goleta Lemon Festival, September 27th and 28th. Get ready to pucker up for a weekend filled with fun, family, and community pride, and we hope to see you all there.
Oh, thank you. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, if any member of the public on the Zoom webinar wishes to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I am seeing none, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
We got to get the lemon out of here.
Who's in the? Oh. Okay.
Okay. That'll take us to our first discussion action item. That is item C1, introduction and first reading by title only of a tenant protections ordinance amending chapter 8.19 tenant protections of Title 8 Health and Safety of the Goleta Municipal Code.
Thank you. Mr. Imhoff.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. To present this item, we have our senior housing analyst, Lucy Graham, who's participating remotely this evening, and she's going to take us through the presentation.
Yes. One moment. All right. Can you see that presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Thank you. I'm a little hoarse on the best of days, but I'm under the weather today, so bear with me. But I'm here to present on amendments to our tenant protections ordinance. So a little background on how we got here. If you recall, we adopted an urgency tenant protections ordinance in December 2023. But council directed us to come back with any recommended revisions after doing some research. At that meeting, staff did a presentation and recommended some policy changes, but the item was referred to the ordinance committee for feedback. So in May of this year, we went to the ordinance committee and discussed all of the topics that you'll hear about tonight. And then, of course, tonight we're doing the introduction and first reading of those amendments. So for anyone not familiar, I'll just go through the tenant protections that we currently have in place. These are all found in Chapter 8.19 of the Goleta Municipal Code, which includes the applicability of this ordinance. So one thing I want to mention is that some types of units are excluded. For example, single-family homes and condos can be exempt if they include a notification in the lease that the unit is exempt. And kind of the meat of what we're talking about today is the regulations require that a just cause, either at fault or no fault, be provided when terminating a residential tenancy. And no fault just cause can include owner move-in or family move-in, permanent removal from the rental market, compliance with applicable laws or codes, or compliance with a court order, or to demolish or substantially remodel the rental unit. For no-fault terminations, a relocation assistance payment to the tenant is required in an amount equal to 2 months' rent. Specific to substantial remodels, to terminate a tenancy for a substantial remodel, it must be primarily for compliance with health and safety, and the termination notice served on the tenant must include copies of issued permits, and a copy of that notice needs to be provided to the Planning and Environmental Review Department within 5 days. The regulations also require offering a 1-year lease to tenants, and tenants displaced for a substantial remodel are offered the right of first refusal to re-rent that unit once the remodel is completed. The rental rate upon return is limited to the previous rental rate plus 5% plus the change in the cost of living, or plus 10%, whichever is lower. So now I'll go over the amendments. They're listed here, but I'll go through each one separately. First is the added definition of an early alert tenant notice, which is an additional 60 days notice before issuance of that no fault just cause notice of termination. And landlords who provide this additional notice have the option to pay half the relocation assistance payment at the time the notice of termination is issued and half at move out. So this would mean a total of 120 days of notice for that tenant to prepare for the unexpected loss of their rental unit. The next topic involves a landlord's right to withdraw their housing unit from the rental market. California state law affirms and protects that right for landlords. So the proposed amendment language makes clear that the city expects that permanent withdrawal be at least 10 years. If a unit were to be re-rented within 10 years, there would be a rebuttable presumption that the removal from the rental market was not intended to be permanent. To help tenants find and secure new housing, as well as to move and store all their belongings and pay any miscellaneous fees like application fees, deposit, setup fees, the current regulations require payment of that relocation assistance equal to 2 months' rent. The ordinance committee recommended setting the payments at 2 months' rent or a specific dollar amount. And recent rental data shows that 2-bedroom apartments in Goleta are being listed for over $4,000. And as a local jurisdiction example, the County of Santa Barbara requires that relocation assistance payments be equal to 3 months of HUD's fair market rent for the area, or $7,000, whichever is greater. So staff is recommending that relocation payments be equal to 2 months of the tenant's current rent, or $8,000, whichever is greater. The ordinance committee was supportive of a requirement that information on local housing programs be included in case of a no-fault termination of tenancy. The information would need to be required or be provided along with all the other required information in the notice of termination. Staff is sensitive to additional requirements and regulations, so we want to make sure that any such requirement is clear and easy to implement. So we're recommending that the required handout or information for a handout be provided and updated regularly by the city. And I will say that while we do have a tenant protections webpage on our city website, I think that it is time, especially with the passage of these amendments, that we make some edits to our city website and make all this information more visible, prominent, and accessible. Regarding the right of first refusal to re-rent a unit after a substantial remodel, we're recommending 2 amendments. That tenants must respond to an offer to re-rent the unit within 30 days. And if they don't respond, or if they turn it down, then the landlord can rent the unit to any applicant. Just making that clear in the ordinance. And adding a new substantial remodel rent petition process, whereby a landlord seeking a fair and reasonable return on their investment can petition to increase the rent beyond what is allowed by the ordinance. And that process would involve filing a petition with the city, the PER department, and copying the tenant. The director would consider all the facts and make a decision, and that decision would be appealable to the Planning Commission. And finally, we're recommending more explicit language defining tenant harassment as activities with no lawful purpose that affect the tenant's use or enjoyment of their rental unit. These include reducing or removing housing services that were included in the lease, failing to make timely repairs, threatening harm, invading privacy, retaliating against tenants for exercising their rights, things like that. And related, along with clear definitions of tenant harassment, we're recommending more specific remedies related to tenant harassment. So these include actual damages or a minimum of $1,000 per violation or civil penalties up to $10,000. And we're recommending language that makes it clear that these remedies could be applied whether or not the tenant has already moved out. And I just want to point out, to be clear, these are legal remedies. They're not automatic or enforced by the city generally, but rather could be awarded at the discretion of the court. Oh, I said finally, but one more thing. We realize that there is a typo in the draft ordinance that was in the staff report. So the corrected language is shown here. The strike through and underline language was typed in by mistake, but the just underlined text here is the correct amendment. So that concludes my presentation. And we are recommending that you introduce and conduct the first reading for this ordinance as amended.
Thank you. I first want to thank staff for all the hard work they put into this, and the committee that worked on this, and also thank you all for your comments and letters that we've received and work on this. And so I'm going to go first to council for questions. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So first, just as a observation, we're on the homelessness committee also, and when you look at the progress the city has made and other jurisdictions have made, it's really challenged by the fact that there's a continual stream of new homeless. And so any ability that we have of preventing people from becoming homeless, and that's, I'm referring to the measure that's here that would give people a heads up about the resources that are available, the opportunities that are available, whether it is some sort of mediation or grants or other sorts of things that'll help people, because the biggest challenge, the biggest expense is once they become homeless, not before. And so if we're able to intervene, so I really support that measure. There's one other thing that I wanted to raise right now, and that's with regard to the withdrawal. There was a question about whether we had a few comments about what time frame is appropriate. And I guess I would suggest we use a shorter time period than the 10-year period that's in there right now for a couple of reasons. Let's see, the first is that, there's only, when people pull it off the market, they might not know what's going to happen. The future after 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, you don't know. If somebody has moved in, a family member has moved in, the idea that they were going to stay 10 years, it's unlikely to be clear or that you could know for sure. And so it's uncertain. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we don't really want to restrict housing, limit our housing availability. What we want here, what we're doing here, is to ensure that withdrawal is not some sort of device for people to evict tenants. But we don't want to just unnecessarily have housing removed from the market or pushed into short-term vacation rentals. So that's the second thing. The third point, in a sense, is that the penalty is this rebuttable presumption, and that is where a tenant would recognize that they would have been tracking or aware of what a landlord is doing or a property owner is doing to be able to take some sort of civil action. And that's really, to me, only likely to, if they see it rented in a very short period of time. They'll suspect that there was some device or scheme after 6 months, maybe a year. But 5 years later, it's the penalty associated with the withdrawal is, I would say, meaningless. So I would suggest that we use a shorter period of time, and I think it will have the same effect that we want. What the effect is that we want is to discourage people from using withdrawal as a way of evicting tenants without cause. And we want there to be some sort of disincentive that's there. And if you just take 4 years of no rent, comparing, so if you compare, let's say I toss out a tenant because I can get $1,000 a month more from my lease. If you look at 20 years of an extra $1,000 a month and discount it, it comes out to about $14,000. So what it's worth right now for me to do that is about $14,000 in today's money. All of that is to say that 4 years of zero rent is probably, of a unit, is probably, if it's a $4,000 a unit per month, that's $16,000. So I guess all of that, I didn't explain it terribly well, but all of that is to say that I think we have the disincentive to, for people to use withdrawal as a way to get around the rent eviction sort of thing with a shorter period of time, and we have a kind of more, in fact, more likely that it'll be enforceable, that is, that tenants will be paying attention to it and so forth. So that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Carriaco?
Thank you. I do have some questions. I think one of the slides covered this, but what is the tenant relocation assistance dollar value for the city of Santa Barbara? I heard for the county, I think it was 3 months or 7,000. What is it for the city of Santa Barbara?
Councilmember Kiriakou, the city of Santa Barbara requires, well, their language says an amount set by the city council or a payment equal to 1 month's rent plus $1. And the council, I believe, has not yet set an amount.
Okay. For
If I may, my understanding is that City of Santa Barbara has 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about how the appeal process works? Is it something, I'm trying to think about, okay, if I was a landlord and I wanted to appeal, what are the steps that I would have to go through in order to be able to effect an appeal? Can I send an email? Is there a short form? I don't, when it says the word petition, I don't really know what that means from an operational standpoint. Like what is the amount of legwork that someone has to do to complete a petition?
Councilmember Kiriakou, an email would not suffice. It's a form, it would be a more formal process to be developed. We don't have that petition in place right now, but we do accept applications for things in the PER department, and so it would be something analogous to submitting a permit application.
Okay.
And providing backup documentation.
Okay.
And a project description, if you will.
Okay, so it does require a little bit of work. It's not just, hey, I disagree, hit send.
Right. Okay. You need to provide, the basis for your petition.
Okay. Can you remind me, how long has the current ordinance been in effect, the urgency ordinance, which is largely unchanged absent a few amendments that we're considering tonight in terms of a permanent ordinance? How are things going with the current ordinance? Are we getting a lot of complaints, or are we not getting a lot of complaints?
I have not received a lot of complaints. I've spoken with a few people here and there. I did talk at length with one tenant about her situation, and ways that she was able to use the ordinance and some ways that she wished that the language were a little clearer. And I believe that some people have made use of the mandatory 1-year lease provisions, things like that.
Okay. For the handout, for folks, the anti-displacement handout, who would be responsible for creating and ensuring the accuracy of that handout? Would that be something that would be put on the landlords? Is that something the city would be responsible for?
Staff is envisioning that that would be on the city, not to create a greater burden on landlords in implementing these regulations. The city is in a good position to be aware of existing programs, and it's our requirement. So the city would provide that information and keep it updated on the website.
Okay. One of the new provisions that's being considered is, you touched on this, was reducing services in the lease. Can you help me understand what you mean when you say services? And are these services that would be specific to an individual tenant, or more of a general amenity like the pool, like a community pool or something like that? Are we talking storage units? Are we talking more individual services specific to a unit, or broader services that a tenant would also enjoy?
So it would depend on the circumstances, the specific situation, but generally, if a service was being removed from all tenants on a property, that would not constitute tenant harassment under this provision, unless it was in the context of, clear retaliation. But a common example, I think, of a service that's reduced is removing access to an on-site garage, or, like you mentioned, extra storage on-site that the tenant previously had access to, and that was removed for no apparent reason, if you will.
Okay. And can you just remind me, when someone just wants to end the business relationship with a tenant, is that really where that 2 months of relocation assistance comes into play, and basically you just kind of sever the relationship, or are you required to kind of endlessly offer 1-year leases, regardless of whether you want to or not? Do you have a way of ending a business relationship if you just want to end the business relationship?
You have to have a just cause in order to do that, either at fault or no fault.
Okay. And what types of units? Goleta's still mostly a single-family home kind of city. What types of units does this ordinance not apply to? Does it apply to single-family homes? Does it apply to condominiums? Does it apply to new construction? There's a fair amount of new construction coming in the near future, inside and outside the city.
Right. So those are good examples of units that are or can be exempt from the provisions of this ordinance. I think I mentioned earlier that single-family homes and condominiums can be exempt if the landlord simply notifies the tenant, either in the written agreement or with a separate notice. And certain other types are excluded, for example, units built in the last 15 years, so new housing, as you say, or units where the owner lives on site, things like that. There's a whole list of types of housing units that are exempt.
Okay. Last question for now. What are the requirements for a tenant response on right of first refusal? Can they respond with just like a text message or an email? Do they have to provide some kind of formal notice that they intend to take advantage of the right of first refusal with the rent cap?
Well, that's something that could be described in greater detail as time goes on, but currently, I mean, they have to receive a formal written offer and they need to sign it
Okay.
at minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Reyes-Martin?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I may have some more later. But to start, I'll actually start to pick up on something Councilmember Kiriakou asked about. So given all of the examples you shared of, and I want to focus on what is exempt. I know you mentioned some things can be and some things are, but of the things that are already exempt with our existing ordinance, given that, do you have an idea of the estimate, maybe like the percentage of rental units in Goleta that this does apply to, given the categories of exemptions you shared? Do you have any sense of that?
I don't in any exact numbers, but I believe in previous hearings, meetings, we talked about data where staff looked at the number of apartment buildings with 5 units or more. There were less than 200. And then apartment buildings with 1 to 4 units, or properties with 1 to 4 units, and there were, again, less than 200. And then the vast majority, I believe, between 6,000 and 7,000 were single-family homes. And I don't know how many of those are rented or owner-occupied, et cetera, but that gives you a sense of the scale.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to a couple of other questions. So I did also have a question about the 10 years. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem that does seem like a longer time than I think achieves what we're trying to do with that. I don't know what a lower amount is, so maybe I'd like to hear a little bit more of what the discussion was in the ordinance committee about what is just maybe restate what are we trying to solve for, and did you consider different time periods, kind of where you got to the 10 years? I forget who's on ordinance. Is it Smith and Mayor Pro Tem?
I can follow up on that. And I'm, to be frank, I'm trying to remember because our discussion was in May of this year.
Oh, that's right.
So state law already applies in this context. So these are protections that are already in place in terms of this concept of permanent withdrawal. And, you know, it would be up to a court to decide, to make that decision if there was a dispute between the landlord and the tenant. So providing a number provides additional clarity. You know, and so I'm trying to recall, I mean, so I think we were sort of wanting to have a number, so arguably any number provides, for a judge looking at these things, some clarity, but again, it's rebuttable. So if a landlord had a good reason and could rebut that presumption, they could do so and present that evidence to the court.
No matter what the amount of time is.
Right, even at a 10-year proposal. So I think with that in mind, the idea is to sort of provide, you know, and I guess in terms of thinking about the concept of permanent, that number, but I don't recall that we discussed this at length.
Yeah, I mean, we recognize that we didn't want to create some sort of loophole to open the door to, you know, to encourage the use of withdrawal as a way around the rent eviction kind of thing. But I didn't think we chose a number. That was Do you remember otherwise?
Mayor and Council, I'm just looking at my notes from that meeting, and that is correct. There wasn't a clear recommendation, but the committee discussed the trade-offs, including the desire to prevent abuse, but also the same considerations that Mayor Pro Tem you mentioned about not wanting to reduce the housing stock. And the committee did reference the parallel to the Ellis Act and the 5-year right of return and suggested that we explore that. So I don't think we had a clear recommendation, and that's a number that's very easy for us to change and fill in the draft ordinance if the council would like to consider a lower number.
Okay, thank you. I'm supportive of considering a lower number when we're ready for that. And I did want to just clarify, I want to make sure I have my notes correct on the relocation assistance. What is currently in place for the city of Santa Barbara and the county? So the city of Santa Barbara is 2 months. Is it 2 months? I just want to confirm that. I think I got yes. Is it 2 months or an amount, whichever is greater?
So Ms. Graham may be able to address this more specifically, and the information she had stated, which I think is directly from the adopted ordinance, states that the council, the Santa Barbara City Council, is able to specify an amount, and I'm not sure where the 2 months came from.
My understanding, so the city of Santa Barbara has had some back and forth on this, and it's been by a resolution. So it's a little bit, it's not in
an ordinance.
That's the best of my recollection. And it's additionally confusing because I believe they have a whole sort of separate provision where if I think for demolition of units, that's in a whole separate category of ordinances. So it gets a little bit confusing. I don't recall the specifics off the top of my head. Their language is a little bit different, though, in terms of how they articulate it, but it's...
And I think Isaac might want to.
Mr. Rosen?
Yes, so Councilmember Smith is correct. I think it's a challenge to find the latest from the city of Santa Barbara, but the county of Santa Barbara, which Ms. Graham mentioned, does account for fair market value rent, or $7,000, whichever is greater. So they do have mirrored language about taking the larger amount. And we have seen rent relocation amounts in some other jurisdictions, including the city of LA, that have a wider range from just under 10,000 to upwards of 25,000, depending on sort of the eligibility criteria. So we have seen instances in other jurisdictions of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and other ways that those municipalities have sought to find a formula that fits for the demographics of the area and the cost of relocation.
Okay, thank you. And then I think one of the other questions I had, which was probably a refresher, and Ms. Graham may have answered part of this, but the benchmark that was used for the relocation assistance is a 2-bedroom unit. Is that because that is kind of the most common type of unit in Goleta, or can you just speak more to that? Just for maybe it's for my edification, why that's the benchmark?
That is a common unit type. It also is to address the fact that when you are suddenly in the housing market unexpectedly, you may not be able to get the same type of unit that you were in before or that is ideal for your situation.
Got it. Thank you. And, on that, how is that? So, well, we wouldn't be using the median. I guess how often would we look at that? If we set the ordinance, in 2025, with that, for example, that 8,000, which is based on this, 2 month. Now, there hasn't been very much fluctuation in how expensive it has been to rent here. But let's say in the future, the rents come down or that median rent comes down. Would there be a mechanism for staff to bring this back to council to relook at that? Is that some kind of metric that staff would be looking at from year to year? Or the opposite, if rents keep going up much higher, and we need to readjust that? Have you given some thought to that, since that could be a moving target?
Councilmember Reyes-Martin, that's a good question. The housing market can be volatile. I think for increased rents, the whichever is greater language hopefully takes care of that scenario. If the housing market were to tumble, then we could certainly bring that back to council and recommend or seek your direction on how to treat that.
Okay, thank you. I think those are my questions for now.
Councilmember Smith, did you have some questions?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate the comments already received. One question I had was if there is a time limit in terms of the proposed petition process for the owner landlord to bring to request an exception in terms of the rental amount. If a unit were re-rented by a tenant and if the landlord was petitioning to increase beyond the 10% or that level, is there a time limit for them to bring that request?
Councilmember Smith, currently, no, there is not a time limit, a deadline. The language in the ordinance requires the landlord to make a written offer to the tenant to re-rent, and that offer needs to include the rental rate, and they need to offer a 1-year lease, but there is no specific deadline on the petition.
And Councilmember Smith, to piggyback off what Ms. Graham said, there is language that ties it specifically to that process, to the tenant's right of first refusal. So under C1 of the ordinance, it does say the landlord shall file the petition within 30 days from receipt of tenant's written election if they're going to exercise their right of first refusal. And the ordinance also talks about that obligation that within a set amount of days, the tenant who's exercising that right of first refusal has to express their willingness to the city. So there's some timing built in just as it relates to the tenant's option to exercise, which would initiate the process by which a landlord could seek to increase the amount above the limitation.
Okay, so in theory, a tenant might already, I guess I'm thinking this out loud. I was just trying to think of a scenario where a tenant might already be occupying and renting, and then if this process was unfolding. But it sounds like the intent is that this process unfolds before the unit is occupied.
If we're talking about substantial remodel, they will have given the notice to the tenant of termination for the substantial remodel. The tenant then has a specific amount of time, I believe it's 30 days, to file a request for the right of first refusal after the substantial remodel is complete. And then the landlord has to file the substantial remodel rent petition under C1 of 8.19060 as amended within 30 days from receipt of tenant's written election to exercise that right of first refusal. And I will add one more, just to note that under C2, the landlord has certain mailing obligations. So it does have to be sent by first-class mail, postage prepaid to any impacted tenant that's seeking to utilize that right of first refusal.
Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to get a sense. So if I'm the tenant and I say, yes, I am interested in re-renting this unit. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how this actually would unfold on both sides. Because the proposed rental amount would be included when the tenant's notified at that time.
Correct.
Okay. And then I was also looking at the factors that are not required but can be considered by the planning director if there should be any appeal regarding the planning amount. And I'm wondering if we might consider an additional factor to be considered, which was the purchase price of the property. I realize it's a sort of a suggestive list, but I think that would be informative in terms of the sort of the investment question. If that could be added. So that was just a comment I had. The ordinance committee hadn't seen that language before this evening, so that was one suggestion I had. In terms of the number, you know, for me, I'm comfortable in terms of, you know, talking about the permanent withdrawal. I'm comfortable with the 10-year number as is, knowing that it's rebuttable, but I welcome additional discussion or feedback on that item. But my preference would be to keep that status quo. And again, right, that the only time that would arise if there were a dispute, and if it is, I will say, it is rare that there's ever, you know, a wrongful eviction action filed. Most people move on with their lives. But to the extent that you know, that somebody could seek redress, having a number, you know, can be helpful for a judge or other person making a decision in terms of, you know, what presumptions are at play. So I'm okay with it as is. The landlord would be able to present their case before a judge should there be the dispute between the two parties.
I guess I'm going to jump in here. I'm struggling with that one. When I first read the ordinance and the item in the packet, and the 10 years just seemed excessive to me. It just, I couldn't figure out, and the expense of having to then rebuttal it and go to court. And I don't know. I mean, if my colleagues feel like they would like to leave it at that, I personally would like to make it, maybe split it in like 5 years, something instead of 10. But 10, I don't. That just kind of concerns me. But I did want to follow up on really quickly, because my questions really have been answered. A lot of them asked and answered. One of our community members in their comments suggested, and I think this is something that the city of Goleta really tries really hard to do a good job at, information to the public. And I'm hoping that, you know, we have the capacity to, there's a lot of ways to get information out for both the tenants and the landlords to keep everybody out of court. I like the idea of making sure that it's something easily to access on our website, but also hard copies. Not everybody goes to a website. Workshops, maybe have some online videos, having it broken down in layman terms so people can understand. number to call, email address to write members. So a lot of different, I'm just saying, there was suggestion in this written comment from community members that that's critical, I think, in working through all this. And I'm hoping that the city has the bandwidth, the capacity to handle all that. So I guess that's a comment and a question. It's going to have to be that way, I think. Anyway. Mr. Imhoff?
Mayor, I can just address that very briefly, and yes, that is something that we can address and are prepared to. So we'll look at ways to make sure that we have clear, easily accessible information, both online on the city's website and in a paper form, and that is written in a way that's easy to understand and accessible.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan?
Yeah, thank you.
Before we go to council, public?
Well, I guess I just wanted to point out that longer periods of time for the going back to the idea of withdrawal doesn't make it more stronger or more likely to be enforced. That as we get further away, the potential of the likelihood that a tenant is going to be aware and paying attention and following it and then being willing to take it to court falls with each succeeding year. So the real, you know, the point of this in some ways is to create a disincentive for a landlord to pull it off the market as a way of evicting tenants. And I think that we don't get a greater disincentive with more years because it becomes less likely it would ever be enforced. That the enforcement potential is greatest in the first few years. And the other thing is, let's say somebody, it might be, somebody's going to college and they want to put their child in college for 4 years. Now, some kids take longer than others. Maybe a kid will take 10 years. But more often than not, they would want to rent it again in 4 or 5 years. And do we want to enforce that they keep it off the market and not have that available for housing for 4 extra years? So I did have a question with all of that. And the question was, I think you had mentioned that I think it was Costa Hawkins had a 5-year, was that the legislation? You know, in casting about what makes for an appropriate or a reasonable benchmark, and you said 5 years was.
So Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, the Ellis Act addresses this, but
Ellis
I don't
Act,
think it
no.
specifies a term. Ms. Graham can address this more knowledgeably than I can.
Right. In jurisdictions that have rent control, withdrawal from the market, there are some regulations related to that, and there are 2 timeframes. So if the unit is re-rented within 5 years, I believe the landlord has to re-offer it, right of first refusal to the prior tenant. And then the 10-year period does not include a right of first refusal.
Okay, so the Ellis Act, in other words, has 2 sort of benchmarks, or a 5-year window and a 10-year window. And when you put this together, you opted for the 10-year for consistency, in a sense, with Ellis as opposed to the 5-year. Is that more or less right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I would just add, so the 5 and 10-year terms that Ms. Graham's deciding do apply to jurisdictions with rent controls in place under the Ellis Act, but it does provide a framework for describing certain periods of time contemplated in the larger scheme of sort of tenant protection. So it is based on existing state law, but
just as a
by way of example,
for casting about
Correct.
Something to hang your hat on. Okay. Well, I guess. I think I would be inclined for the 5 rather than the 10, but
Okay. Any other questions? And then, no, seeing none, then I'm going to ask for the public.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have about 5 speakers. Those of you on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. Each speaker will get 3 minutes. Our first speaker is Ed Belcher.
Well, good evening. I am Ed Belcher. I am a tenant in Goleta, and I am a member of SBTU. Thank you for your work and consideration for the Tenant Protections Code. I have 3 comments. Do not include the proposed substantial remodel rent petition in the code. I didn't remember hearing that in May. That's something that's since May. If approved, the landlord can get a higher than 10% increase after a tenant returns from a required relocation. Remember, the landlord is just complying with basic health and safety codes. That's why the tenant was had to leave. It's a default for rental units to have that basic health and safety codes. There's no reason to have a higher rate than 10% on return of what he was paying before. Number 2, add per diem payments for mandatory relocation payments less than 30 days. The code is absolutely silent for any payments at all when the relocation is less than 30 days. Oh, you're gone for 29 days? No payment. A number of cities include per diem for tenant short-term removals. Also, paying tenants per diem motivates the landlord to get the job done expediently. So, number 2 was the per diem payments. Number 3, add a buyout agreement protocol. We talked about something like that just a few minutes ago, but Kyriako. Add a buyout agreement protocol that allows the landlord a no-fault tenants to end their lease voluntarily. For example, when the landlord wants to upscale his property and rent it on the open market, add a buyout agreement protocol that ensures that the tenants get a fair deal when dealing with the landlord. A buyout agreement means it's like cash for keys. I agree to to move out because you want to use the building for whatever purpose for X amount of money, and that's something that's a fair deal with the tenant and the landlord. Recall that buyout agreements finally allowed successful negotiations for all parties in the 215 Bath Street rent eviction battle that went on and on and on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michael Chambers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My comments are these. When government increases tenant rights and reduces the rights of the property owner, the result is negative to both the tenant and the landlord. The rental property owner has hard-earned capital invested in the property and will react accordingly. The availability of the rental unit will diminish, and the property will revert to a management company, removing the mom-and-pop history of small-town landlord-tenant relationship. Removed from the market and overpriced are both undesired options for the community. Less units will be available because property owners don't want the legal liability of renting to tenants with a gang of lawyers hungry to sue landlords. There is a need for housing, and any government interference in the market upsets the basic supply and demand of rental housing, just like other sectors. The government should have permitted more housing years ago, and now you're screwed because RHNA demands and are attempting to balance your because of RHNA demands and are attempting to balance your previous poor decisions on the backs of diligent rental property owners. Most have worked all their lives and risked thousands of dollars to supply livable spaces to the community. I suggest that you back way off on your laws and regulations and wait and see where our economy is going instead of punishing the folks that you really need, the rental property owners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Miguel Alavilla.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, staff. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here to speak as a realtor, also as a resident of the Santa Barbara area. When your agenda was published, some of my clients who I've sold properties, income property, 2 to 4 units, most of them, right away they started calling me. They're not the type of people that would come and speak in front of city council, but they said, hey, you need to go and speak to in our behalf because this agenda is a pretty much one-sided agenda. It's not favoring the landlords, it's favoring the tenants. And you must keep in mind that landlords need tenants and tenants need landlords. And so I think some of these items that we're discussing here, and I hear your comments, I think these items need to go back to the drawing board. I don't think all of you are ready to pass these items, and I don't think these items will work right now at this moment for either one. I think there's more input that is needed here from the landlords, and I think more meetings need to be facilitated by the staff. But definitely, this item need to be discussed further. Like I said, they favor mostly the tenants, which is fine. You know, I can see the staff. I hear the comments from Ms. Grand. The tenants seems like they already have plenty of people to speak in their behalf, but the landlords who provide housing, who put their money at risk, because sometimes when the economy, recessions or whatever come into place, you know, the property value goes down, tenants sometimes lose their jobs. Right now, you know, we're dealing with something called ICE that is taking a lot of tenants away. And so right now, landlords are kind of like stuck with vacant units or half of the people who are renting that particular unit are gone because they got taken. And so anyway, so things in behalf of the landlords, I think need more discussion for these items. So I want to encourage you to not to make any decisions this evening, but you know, provide some kind of forums where landlords and can come and give their input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Richard Gerardo.
Hello, first time here, and I wasn't really prepared. I got last minute notice from Miguel just to come and say something. I'm a homeowner in Old Town Goleta, and I have a property catty corner from where I live, and it's a rental. And I just was surprised when I saw these proposals, and this one about giving $8,000 to tenants. Now, I don't know about all the requirements or what, but I've had some tenants that weren't so good, and I don't know. Does this mean that if I had a tenant that wasn't like not paying their rent, would I still have to give them $8,000 to move out? And I don't know. Okay, good. Thank God. Okay. And I had another tenant that was, I pay the utilities because there's more than one unit on the property, and so I can't really have the tenants paying it to keep it going. I don't want them to turn it off if one happens to not pay the bill. So I pay the utilities, and I had a tenant that was through housing that was letting her cousins stay there and baby daddies, both of them, both of her baby daddies were staying there. And everybody who needed a shower, free shower, because I was paying all the utilities. And she finally moved out voluntarily, but it was a rough 5 years she rented. So I didn't give her any money to move out. She moved out. Am I required to give her money if they move out on their own? No? Oh, okay. Oh, okay, thank you. And this 10-year thing, I was thinking, if I have a 90-year-old mother, and if I wanted her to move in across the street from me, I don't know how long she's going to live. I mean, she's 90. She might live, I hope she lives to 100, but if she doesn't, let's say she just lived another year and she moved in next year and lived a year. I mean, it's kind of weird that I couldn't rent the place for 8 years because I took it off the market for, a year or so. I don't know, it seems kind of rough. So these proposals are kind of shocking to me a little bit. And I guess I'm just naive about the whole thing, but I just wanted to say hello and thank you for everything you guys do and appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you.
Next speaker is Gerald Paul.
Evening. We're talking about the 10-year withdrawal. Right now, in Santa Barbara, I could pay somebody 2 months' rent and get them out now and raise my rent. I don't need to wait and do it the other way, like you talk about preventing people. I can do that now, pay the money, get them out, raise the rent if I need to do that. Eat the cost of 2 months' rent and do it. Why would I do it? Why would I do it 10 years? What you people are doing have unintended consequences. The rent goes up. I'm not waiting for you to enact it. I've been doing increases because of the bills that keep coming up and the things, the costs go on there. I don't want to do that, but I've been in business and been involved in this business over 40 years. I see what's going on. It's a bunch of socialism, fascist people, and you're making decisions. I don't know if you have any skin in the game or not. It doesn't seem that way. You want to help people? Help them with your money. Put it in your pocket. You buy a rental property and go out and do that and see what it's like. You don't do that. You make decisions for everybody else, but you don't come up with the money yourself. You want to help people? You can't help everybody. Help two people out of your pocket. It's the first time since we've been in business, we're actually talking selling, somehow transferring, getting rid of the rental properties and out of state and getting out of California. I've known already businesses that have 200 or 300 rental units have sold them and bought somewhere else in Colorado and gotten out, because I can see what's coming up. Someday your property is not going to be worth the money and no one's going to buy it. Then what is it worth? When you can't take the appreciation or whatever it is and no one wants it and it goes down, what do you got? Are you going to wait until that happens? You're holding something, you think it's of value, and suddenly now you can't raise the rent? I'm restricted. The rent in Santa Barbara was restricted 5% plus CPI. 1 year, it was total of 6%. The city of Santa Barbara raised the water, I believe it was 8%, and the trash 9%. 3% we lost. We couldn't raise it. We haven't raised rent 3%. We used to do it, but because of the ordinances you do, because of the things you do, the unintended consequences, you can't see what's going on. I think you guys need to get your own property, invest your own money, deny yourself that to buy the property to help those people you want to help out. Do it with your own money.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ben Kemi, and this is our last in-person speaker.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. There were 2 points in the ordinance proposal that really alarmed me. I think Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan addressed one of them pretty well. The 10 years, that's just crazy long and unnecessary, and anything over 18 months and you're pretty much cutting your nose to spite your face, which I think was his point about, you're not going to have people who after a year and a half know anything about it, and so you're keeping this property vacant for, what, 5 years now? That would be cutting your nose to spite your face because then that unit is no longer available. Those units are no longer available for rental. That defeats the purpose. So I really think anything longer than 18 months is excessive. The second issue has to do with the $8,000 or 2 months rent, which is ever greater. That also seems excessive to me. You're taking the average and saying, well, most of the units that are available for rent are 2 bedrooms, and that may be the case. And they're renting this year for about, $4,000 or something a month, and that may be the case. I kind of think that if you want to be serious about it, then you need to index it based on the number of bedrooms in a unit and, the average tied to whatever, somewhere along the way, Ms. Graham found out the mean number for the average rent for a 2-bedroom. I'm sure wherever she got that, the same number is available for a single bedroom, a 3-bedroom. And you can go, okay, we're tying to that as our index, and that's what it would be. Much more scientific way to go about it, or reasonable in my mind. One last point I want to make, and I'm not really clear on this, and that's about the remodeling. And my question is, there seems to be, I was unclear about whether or not there's a time period associated with the remodeling. And that time period for a remodeling, respectfully, should take into factor the amount of time it takes to get a permit for remodeling from the city of Goleta, which is ungodly long. Sorry to say it, but it's true. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now switch to the in-person speakers. We do have 3 of them. First speaker is Melissa Del Soto. Please unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. I've lived in Goleta mostly as a renter. And I want to say that I hear so many stories about terrible renters, and renters are just terrible. And Section 8 people are just terrible and dirty. And there's a big prejudice against people with Section 8. I happen to be on Section 8, and I want to tell everybody that I am the best tenant you could ever want. I take such good care of my property. I treat it as if it's my own. I sweep outside of my apartment. I take care of my laundry area. I do extra cleaning. So I just want to break the stereotype of the terrible renter. I love my apartment unit. I love my complex, and I'm really grateful to live here. Secondly, I would like to know if anybody knows what the vacancy rate is in Goleta. Last I heard for Santa Barbara, the vacancy rate is about 1%. I'm on Nextdoor all the time, and there are people that are desperately looking for someplace to live. So the gentleman that talked about ICE coming in, kicking people out, and now there are so many apartments vacant, I have a hard time believing that, because I know that our vacancy rate is very small and people are very desperate to find housing. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I appreciate being able to give you some of my thoughts, and I'll pass.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Andrew Schur. If you'll please unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate and thank Ed for his lucid and pertinent discussion from the tenant standpoint. And thank you, Melissa. And yes, it is 1%, if not lower. There's nowhere to live out here. So I think your comments are very pertinent, and I appreciate them. And I agree with those comments. And yeah, speaking to the landlord that has issues with tenants coming in and showering, I commute in and I work as a lifeguard at Goleta Pier, and I watch people come and shower in the ocean all day. Like, people are going to do what they have to do because it's so hard to live out here, right? We have to address this, and I really thank you guys for having this conversation. but I am definitely on the side of the tenants. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anna Ars. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So, good evening, council members. My name is Anna Arce, and I am the policy advocate with CAUSE. We appreciate city staff's work on the proposed amendments to the tenant protection ordinance. However, we urge the council to take this opportunity to continue to strengthen current tenant protections. As written, the ordinance amendments leaves gaps that put low-income renters, working families, and seniors at risk of long-term housing instability and displacement. So our recommendations are to no exceptions to the anti-harassment protections and include this with a just cause for all and not limit a strong ordinance with exceptions. So every tenant is protected. Provide a clear petition process when drafting the substantial remodel rent petition. So currently, I know that this is going to be during like the drafting process. So we recommend to mandate that any rent increases requests be supported by verifiable, transparent, financial documented evidence as to why a higher percentage is needed for a fair return. Require that all petitions and appeals costs be paid by the property owner, not the city or the tenants. Ensure that tenant protections, including rent caps, remain in full effect while any petition is pending. And also direct staff to research how other cities have justified rent increases requests beyond the 10% for substantial remodels specifically. And then we would also recommend to consider including a short-term displacement assistance for tenants displaced for fewer than 30 days and provide buyout agreements, a regulated, transparent process that is essential to ensure these negotiations are voluntary and informed. I figured that ding is my time. Oh, not yet. And then this also protects tenants and provides clarity for landlords, and including these strong enforceable protections to this ordinance will also create that urgent need, housing need in Goleta. So thank you for your time and for your diligence with this, with tenant protections and providing the support.
Thank you.
And that concludes public comment, Mayor.
Okay. Back to Councilmember Smith.
Yes, I was just wondering if staff might address a few of the questions that came up. So for clarification on relocation assistance, my understanding is that would be provided only, if there was cause for the landlord to be evicting a tenant, that relocation assistance would not apply. Is that correct?
Councilmember Smith, so relocation assistance payment is only required for no fault, just cause evictions. So if it was an at fault, just cause eviction, for example, violation of the lease or committing waste or fraud or any of the things listed in the ordinance or in state law, then a payment would not be required.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And so it would have to be a no fault. So if a tenant were voluntarily leaving a unit, it wouldn't apply in that context either.
That's correct. If they gave notice that they were leaving the unit.
Got it. Great, thank you for that clarification. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that at least those questions were answered. So I welcome, I have other comments, but I'm not sure if any others have any questions before we move into deliberation.
I think there's might be a few more questions. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I was curious about the that idea about buyout agreements, that didn't, we haven't talked about that before, I don't, well, you tell me if, what the thought process is. It isn't in our ordinance, right? So did I miss it? So is it, I don't know, could you tell me more about your thinking?
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, that is not something that we discussed either at the committee level or previously at the council, but it's something that we could take up if the council would like us to.
I think it would be interesting. I'd be supportive of seeing it. I mean, so this would be a future project for you to do. And let me ask you this. How does it mesh, or how would it be kind of integrated into it? Does it seem like it would make sense in the context of the ordinance right now that is on the table?
Mayor Pro Tem, I would look to
occasion.
Ms. Graham to address this, but I imagine that it would simply be an additional section in the ordinance, so that we'd probably want to look at some other examples, and we'd certainly want to look carefully at the language and get our city attorney office to review, but I think we would simply create another section that addressed that kind of a voluntary buyout.
Okay.
I just have a follow-up on that question for Mr. Rosen, possibly. If that was something that we would agree on this evening, wouldn't it not have to, the whole ordinance would have to stop at this point? It would have to go back to the committee or the ordinance? So am I correct in that?
That's correct, Mayor. So because we haven't discussed to date or reviewed or have language ready to sort of present to the city, and to Director Imhoff's point, between PER and the city attorney's office, we'd want to look at specific language that could be recommended and then would come back on first reading. My understanding about buyout agreement protocol, I believe it's been instituted maybe in San Francisco and some larger jurisdictions, but I can't speak to sort of the specifics of what that would entail.
But we'd be able to go forward with this now and then come back and just supplement it with a future provision.
Well, that would be at the discretion of the council. You could either direct us to go back and to add this language before you took action, or you could take action on what's before you tonight and give us direction to return with something in addition.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, that we proceed with this, with what we have today, and then at a future occasion, as time permits, that we augment it.
So are you saying we proceed, if we proceed with the ordinance this evening, we wouldn't put anything in, but at some point it would come back and put that in? Because, or are you saying, no, you're going to put it in tonight, but we don't know?
No, not tonight.
Okay.
No, in other words, like we did with Title 17 or something, that it would just be a future amendment for this provision, that there's an additional element that.
And is that, that's?
Madam Mayor and council members, I would recommend, if that's something the council's interested in, that we put that on the potential work plan
Yeah,
for the planning
that's-
department
okay, I
next
got it.
spring.
Okay.
And when we
I
come back next
misunderstood.
spring, we'll have that on the
Yeah.
list, and the council can then decide how it ranks with other work items that you'd like
That's
the
all.
department to work on.
Yeah, that's all I had in mind, is that I think it's interesting. I'd like to hear more about it at a future point, but I'm not suggesting that this come to a halt. And I guess the other thing is that I was curious about is to get your reaction to the idea, I forgot whose proposal it was, but some sort of forum of, and I guess maybe did we have a discussion, or did this come up previously? A forum with landlords and tenants about, what's working, what's not working, and have we had that discussion?
Mayor
Or
Pro
is
Tem,
it
when
like
this
deja vu?
Yeah, well, when this first came to council, I think council had hoped that the ordinance committee would function as a forum of that nature. And that, as I recall, was one of the reasons why the council directed us to bring it to the ordinance committee. But I think there was simply more interest expressed here in the council chambers for the full council meeting than in the committee.
Well, I do think if, at a future date, I think it would be just as we collect to Councilmember Kiriako's point, for instance, about what sort of experiences there have there been concerns or questions? Are there, what's working, what's not working? It would be helpful to have some sort of forum at a future date where people can, ultimately, we're trying to find a process that benefits. It's not that landlords are our enemies or anything like that. Landlords are who we depend on for renting out, for supplying rooms to our the body of Goleta. So we're trying to find something that accommodates both the tenants and protects the tenants and accommodates and supports the landlords. It's that middle ground that we're looking for. So I think some forum where we find if something's not working, we can hear about it. I guess that's it for right now. Oh, I guess one other thing to beat that poor 10-year, 5-year question into the ground is I don't believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody withdraws a unit, are they able to put it into short-term vacation rentals? So, in other words, what we don't want is to say we're going to remove, have a 10-year period so that they just spend much of the time. We just are incentivizing people to use short-term vacation rentals rather than the regular lease-based rentals.
I think there's some misunderstanding. A landlord would still be able to re-rent their unit. The only time this would even come up is if a tenant filed a lawsuit in court.
No.
Right? So that's the only time this 10-year question arises. So landlords and even now they can re-rent, and the question would be for that judge, to decide under state law and local law, if there was a wrongful eviction.
That taking it to the court is whether there's going to be a penalty. The 5-year or 10-year, whatever it is what our ordinance says is appropriate for penalizing. So in other words, if we say 10 years, it means that for that whole window, that somebody isn't allowed officially to re-rent it because they would be subject to a tenant, having the rebuttable assumption, thank you, that it was a scheme or a device if it is rented again. So for that 10-year period, they're officially prohibited or at least subject to the vulnerability of being taken to court. And what I'm saying is allow them to rent it after a shorter period of time where they're not subject to being taken to court if they rent it.
They would still be at risk of going to court at any time. It's just a question of whether or not a rebuttable presumption exists. So this is already right. We already have an ordinance in effect that talks about. So we already have an ordinance that's in place. It's just a question of sort of adding this rebuttable presumption, and that presumption only comes into play if that tenant proactively files a lawsuit in court, and for a judge to decide.
Mr. Rosen, I'm feeling like there's some confusion on this one, and I'm also talking to the audience. I think there's more that everyone needs to learn. I'm not saying to postpone this, but it's obvious that somebody came and spoke, and he's gone now, but about the idea of he's not going to be able to evict someone. That's not true. Am I correct on that? I mean, this doesn't apply to somebody that's not paying their rent, or they're gone, they've disappeared, and they're not there anymore.
Correct, Mayor. So the circumstances you just described would be what I would broadly characterize as an at-fault just cause termination. under state law, a landlord may and is permitted under state law to withdraw a unit from the rental market. So that is an existing provision of state law. That's a no-fault just cause eviction. So that is an existing right under state law, which sort of sets the floor for what the city can do. The city can include a more protective provision as part of a tenant protection. The language in the ordinance, as Councilmember Smith mentioned, is a rebuttable presumption to try to add some parameters of what it looks like when that unit is withdrawn, and and I believe it's accurate to say that a tenant at any time could file a civil action and challenge whether or not the landlord acted in good faith for the removal of the rental unit. As the city's ordinance is drafted, it's meant to articulate a rebuttable presumption that if it's removed from the rental market over a 10-year period, that it was not done in good faith. And so the council, I would say, has the discretion to choose that period of time. But state law does articulate that a landlord may withdraw a unit from the rental market, and a tenant at any time could challenge that if they think the landlord acted in bad faith, and arguing that that was a permissible, no-fault, just cause eviction, if that provides any clarity.
Yes, thank you. That helps me.
Mayor?
Yes, please, Ms. Graham.
If I could just add to that, some of the comments were related to a just cause eviction for family members, and I just wanted to point out that there is a different just cause eviction type for owner move-in or members of their family. So the examples given of someone's child going to college, or the public commenter's mother, right? That's covered under a different type of just cause eviction. And as for the question of short-term vacation rentals, as you know, we have regulations related to short-term vacation rentals, and I believe that someone who has a housing unit in the city of Goleta can use that unit as a short-term vacation rental now. They're not disallowed from doing that. And the Ellis Act, as I mentioned, grants the right to landlords to withdraw their unit from the rental market because they don't want landlords to be penalized for ever having rented that unit, right? So if they want to take it off the market and use it for a different purpose, they have the right to do that under the Ellis Act. And so I just wanted to reframe that discussion a little.
That's helpful. Thank you. Did you have something, Ms. Smith?
Yes, and just to follow up, and I think this has been a really good discussion, and I want to acknowledge, that most of our local landlords and tenants are all operating in good faith, in whether they're renting or whether they're operating their rental business, and so these protections are intended for many of them are intended of protections in situations of bad faith actions. There's been I think there was some question about maybe what we do tonight versus what we do at a future date, and I do think I would agree with Councilmember Kasdan in terms of I think there is some opportunity for further review down the line of some other areas that we may or may not consider, that I think could be considered as part of a work plan. There were some questions. We received a public comment about the question of pets, which was sort of intriguing. There's been some other suggestions that we've received, both comments here and by email. Different jurisdictions have some slightly different language from us, and come next year there may be more lessons learned. So I would agree that I think I would agree in terms of this coming back in terms of a potential work plan item down the line. And then in terms of the current draft, you know, I had one comment about maybe adding one parameter to the petition criteria that could be considered. But I'm flexible if that's going to, you know, delay things. I'm open to considering that at a later date, but I'd welcome additional council member feedback on that item.
Okay. Council Mayor Pro Tem?
No,
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. Just a couple of additional comments. First, I think one thing that's going to be really important if we do move forward with this ordinance is some continued proactive, or I don't know, just more education, because it's clear that this is a really complicated area of law and policy. It's further complicated by the county and the different cities kind of doing something different. So I do recognize that. And I know that Ms. Graham has been very generous with her time in answering questions that have come to her from residents in the city. That's when residents know that they can, you know, come and ask Ms. Graham or ask staff. So I really support, you know, any efforts to try to, as much as possible, provide clear and concise information to the public and to our residents about what this ordinance is and what it is not, you know, to the extent possible, and answer some of those questions. Because I think there are quite a lot of assumptions that are understandably alarming for landlords and even maybe for tenants that can be alleviated through asking those clarifying questions and getting more information. So I wanted to start with that. I also wanted to say, you know, again, this is a complex, ever-changing area with a lot of really important issues. And I wanted to say how much I appreciate the work of the Ordinance Committee and staff, because we've received quite a lot of public comment across a wide spectrum of folks who, you know, disagree and would like the city not to do any of this or do less, to this is not enough, it doesn't go far enough. And it's not often that, you know, with an issue like this, we have a letter in public comment from the Rental Property Association that says we support the vast majority of what is in this ordinance. And I, you know, can understand that they may not represent everyone. They represent their members. I understand that. But I did appreciate that they did support a lot of different things. They also questioned the 10-year, which I think is a reasonable question to have. I continue to support a much lower number there. I did want to also note that on the relocation assistance, while their comment doesn't expressly say they do not support relocation assistance, they did ask for some clarification on terminology. So I would ask staff to maybe look at that. I don't know enough about what they're asking about to know what might need clarification. Maybe that's also an education piece. But I did just want to say that, you know, with complicated policy issues, no one's going to be 100% happy. There's always going to be more work that needs to happen, more things that need to be refined. I'm sure state law will change, and some or all of this will then also need to be relooked at. But I do appreciate the work of staff. I think more education is needed for the public. And I don't want to slow this down if it appears that we have enough council support to approve this first reading. I know that it still has to come back for second reading. But I would still want to support lowering the 10 years. I think that's the one piece that I would want to change tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Carriaco.
You know, I'll keep this brief. So we have we have a housing crisis. And when I look at, if you go to apartments.com, you look at other sources, and you do a search on Goleta, California, the median rent that was in the staff report and in the ordinance, it's not just some theoretical exercise. It's not this number that was just kind of plucked out of reality. I mean, the lowest rent that I found when I was just searching was, I think it was Samita Gardens, and it was almost $4,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment. Those were built in 2009. Hollister Village, Arrive at Los Carneros, some of these other newer builds were $5,000, almost $6,000. A couple of them were over $6,000. There was a 3-bedroom I saw that was under almost $9,000. And so the reason I'm bringing those ones up specifically is because those apartments represent the last time Goleta had a little bit of a building boom, where you had a fair amount of new housing coming on the market within a few years of each other. And I bring that up because one of the public commenters talked about this, and they talked about RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. They talked about how the city had approached RHNA, and they were critical of it. Well, regardless of whether you supported our approach to how we addressed our housing needs in order to satisfy the state, in order to satisfy our community need for housing, there's a lot more housing coming. There's going to be a whole lot more new builds between the Georgie property at the corner of Hollister and Ward that's coming in as builder's remedy, between Glen Annie, between some of the properties in the city. There's going to be a lot more inventory. The landlords in this audience are going to have a lot more competition. So to me, what I think is really the most important thing for landlords to be thinking about is how can we address fixing up our properties for the long term so that they can last another 50 years, so that they can provide a diversity of housing options for our community so we can remain a diverse community. And that may result in your rents also still going up because the ceiling is going to go higher, and so the floor may rise also. But if you're spending so much time arguing with the city or arguing with tenant groups that are dealing with a 1% vacancy rate, I'm concerned that you're going to miss the moment, which is how do we fix up our housing? How do we elevate and improve our housing stock habitability so that it can be there for the long term? That's one of the reasons why I was asking the question about, is there a way for a landlord to make a business decision to be able to have a tenant vacate that isn't covered by the Just Cause ordinance? That's why I asked that question. And so the answer to that question, which came from one of the public commenters, was you could have a voluntary process. You could have kind of an arbitrated agreement where everyone just agrees to go their separate ways. I think for the future and for the long term, I think that's something that we have to address. It was something I was hoping would come to council, but I understand staff's pulled in a million directions. The ordinance committee's pulled in a million directions. We've had changes to the membership of council since this first went to ordinance. So a lot of things have changed. But I think what the ordinance committee has come up with is, on balance, fair and reasonable. And I know that it can be a little scary when you see a number like 10 years. That can be really frightening, like, oh my God, if I want my son to be able to move in with us, if I want my mother to be able to move in with us, if I need to take care of an ill family member, if I've got someone who's going to college, what am I supposed to do? And I think what we're talking about is sort of collecting a data point about something that requires a couple of different hypotheticals to happen before it would even become germane. First of all, you have to take the unit off the market. Second of all, you have to state a purpose. Third of all, you would have to break that purpose in a way that would be hard to legally defend. Then you'd have to have the tenant that left notice that this happened, and then you'd have to have them actually do something about it. So there's like 4 or 5 different things. There's like a what if on a what if on a what if on a what if on a what if. And so while I personally think that the 10 years that was proposed by the ordinance committee can work, and I would almost even say I'm comfortable with it, I also want to acknowledge the space that we're in, the mood of the folks that we're talking to, and acknowledge that there's a little bit of fear there. And I think since we're already, I think, talking about having the ordinance committee potentially have a work plan item where we could address this other issue that we've talked about, that Councilmember Kasdan addressed, I think Councilmember Smith addressed, I think, the issue of could we have some kind of a voluntary process where everyone agrees to go their separate ways in a negotiated conversation. That would also be an opportunity to look at how is the term for this kind of hypothetical issue, how is that working? If let's say we'd brought it down to 5 years, how is it working? Is it working well? Is it not working at all and people are concerned and people are upset? And then we could address it again at the ordinance committee and it can come back to us along with the other change. I think this process necessarily involves some give and take. And I think for way too many years, it's been a lot more give and take in a way that benefits property owners. I think what we're seeing is local governments throughout the region trying to kind of find that balance again a little bit more. And I would argue things are still much more balanced in the favor of property owners because you've got a 1% vacancy rate. That's a really good negotiating situation to be in. It just is. And so I'm comfortable with what the ordinance committee put forward. I don't want to wait. I would suggest, I'll just throw out a number, 5 years. I'm supportive of bringing it down to 5 years, as I think a couple other council members mentioned. But I also want staff to come back during the work plan process with some examples of cities that have been able to, or even counties that have been able to make a common ground process, I'll call it that, a common ground process where a tenant and a property owner can come to a mutual decision, setting aside just cause or not, at fault or not, to be able to just end the business relationship. Because at the end of the day, that's a lot of what it is. It's a business relationship. It's a business relationship where a property owner gets to repair their unit. That increases the value of the unit. That means their investment becomes more valuable, and at the same time, they can charge more money for it. It's almost like a dividend, but like a really good dividend that you get on a monthly basis. So I'm supportive going forward. I was originally in support of keeping the 10 years, but I'm willing to drop it to 5 just to kind of have some unanimity here and to maybe settle some voices in the community that are not feeling so good about this. But otherwise, I think we should go forward.
Councilmember Smith?
I just had a question. If we amend to the 5-year period, does the ordinance need to come back?
Councilmember Smith, I am comfortable, based on the way the content was prepared and agendized, that if council was to change 18.19040 C2 with the actual numerical value of years, that that would suffice under this evening's agendized hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have? Okay. Well, I'm gonna. Councilmember Smith, were you done? Okay. All right. First of all, again, thank you everybody that came to tonight, everybody that wrote emails, and also those that came to the workshop for the ordinance committees and participated in that. And especially thanks staff for all the work on this. It seems obvious to me there's confusion, and that troubles me a great deal. And so I hope that we can, in the future moving forward, be more clear and do everything we can to clear up some of these concerns and misinformation. I'm comfortable with moving forward this evening. And I would agree with the 5-year and then come back for the buyout. I'd like to know more information on that too, so that would come back to us at another time. And then we can also take a look at the 5-year at another time. But I think that's kind of the right thing to do right now, because that's what we heard a lot of. The people were very concerned about 10 years. But I think in a way they really didn't understand it. But in good faith, I think 5 years would be a good idea. I'm fine with moving forward. So, somebody would like to make a motion? Sure. Somebody from the ordinance committee? You guys work so hard. No?
Mayor Parodi, if I could just
Oh, sorry, yes.
remind the council of the correction of the typo.
Yes.
So that would be
As
also
amended.
included in the amended motion.
Would we have to remember?
Can somebody put it
Oh,
up?
I know, it's the comma. It's the.
We'll put it on the screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
please. I think that'd be great.
Can we just say add as amended? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That's good.
Great.
Okay. Shall we?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, kudos to staff for the provision, the appeals process that was included in there. That was a very clever way to kind of deal with a really thorny, challenging issue, and so, nicely done.
Credit goes to Ms. Graham.
Okay, yeah, great job. That was very, very clever. So I move that we introduce and conduct first reading by title only and waive further reading of ordinance number 25, next in line, entitled, "An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, amending Chapter 8.19, Tenant Protections of Title 8, Health and Safety of the Goleta Municipal Code, and determining the ordinance to be exempt from CEQA as amended, and in which we move from 10% to, or for 10 years to 5 years in.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, so if I may take a stab at it, the additional change, in addition to the clerical cleanup as amended, would be to amend 8.19040C2 and to change the reference to 10 years within that section to 5 years.
And does that cover the comma thing too?
That covers the clerical change, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, council members, do lock in your votes. Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Parodi.
Aye. Okay, ayes have it. It's unanimous. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, let's bring this meeting back to order.
That is going to be item C2, Stowe Grove Park caretaking cottage removal and new restroom location.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're here to discuss the consideration to remove the caretaker cottage at Stowe Grove Park and to also discuss the possible relocation of the new restroom to be installed in the southern section of the park. Little bit of a background. As the council is aware, the Neighborhood Services Department worked with the community and design consultants to create the Stowe Grove Park Master Plan. Once the council had supported that final draft of the plan, a California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, document was prepared, and the result was an initial study mitigated negative declaration for the project. In December of 2023, council approved that CEQA document and adopted the master plan. Within this last year, as we were working on the construction documents, staff came before the council to discuss the future of the caretaker cottage, as well as the possible relocation of the new restroom. Council provided direction to seek additional public input on the potential changes and to do further analysis. And since that time, a public workshop was held. The Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed both items, and even the Historic Preservation Commission weighed in on the caretaker cottage. So let's talk a little bit about the caretaker cottage. The history of that, we have, it was evaluated during the initial CEQA document, but for a further evaluation of the historical relevance of this, we hired Rincon, and they conducted a full evaluation. The structure was not an original structure at Stowe Grove Park. In January of 1965, when the property was deeded to the county, one of the requirements was the construction of a new caretaker cottage. As stated previously, the County of Santa Barbara was responsible for park locations from Coyama to Carpinteria, spanning over 129 miles. And at that time, it was a common practice to have a host at park locations throughout the county. In 2002, when the city incorporated, the deed for Stowe Grove Park was transferred to the city, which included the cottage. The city of Goleta put a member of their maintenance team in that cottage until 2016. In 2016, the city evaluated the continuation of a caretaker at that site and also evaluated the conditions of the cottage, and nobody has been in that facility since. While the CEQA document that was adopted did evaluate the renovation, it did not necessarily evaluate a demolition of that structure. So if the council's decision this evening is to demolish the structure, we will come back to council at a later date with any necessary follow-up CEQA documents. The historical evaluation, as we had shared, the Neighborhood Services Department did hire Rincon to review and conduct a historical evaluation specifically to consider the demolition of the caretaker cottage. The historical analysis document prepared by Rincon does outline federal, state, and local criteria as provided in attachment 2 of your report. The 2023 technical report, the park and associated elements, including the caretaker cottage and the garage, were recommended to be ineligible for the listing in the National Registry of Historic Places, the California Registry of Historical Resources, and as a City of Goleta landmark under all applicable criteria found in Chapter 17.33 of our municipal code. However, in the initial report, Rincon did recommend that the City of Goleta consider Stowe Grove Park as a point of historical interest under criteria A1 within the context of institutional development in the City of Goleta, and identified a specific period of significance at the park, which was between 1919 and 1940. Rincon's initial cultural resources technical report from 2023 and subsequent caretaker cottage review have confirmed there are no findings to support that the caretaker cottage meets any of the criteria to be considered as a historic landmark or a point of historic interest individually due to a lack of architectural and/or historical significance. Therefore, implementation of the Stowe Grove Park Master Plan, including all options under consideration for the caretaker's cottage, would result in no impact to historical resources pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. The current status of the facility, as mentioned, the logistics of park management necessitated the need for an on-site caretaker under the county's management when it was established in 1965, but there is no need for an on-site caretaker here as a city maintains the park. At this time, there is no city investment in the refurbishment or replacement of the caretaker cottage. Nothing has been established. The cost of refurbishing or replacing the caretaker cottage, a facility that the city does not have a need for or a plan for, is not a prudent use of public funds. Staff did engage the Stowe family representative to discuss the city's concern and subsequent request to eliminate the caretaker cottage. The item was discussed at the Stowe Company's December 2024 board meeting. The company did relay to city staff that it is comfortable with the city's request not to have a caretaker living on site. They're also comfortable with the city determining the future use of the caretaker cottage in consultation with the community. To satisfy the request of the Stowe family, staff held a special Parks and Recreation Commission meeting earlier this year and a subsequent Historic Preservation Commission meeting in August, where the primary item for each meeting was discussions on the future of the caretaker cottage. The general feedback at both meetings was that there wasn't necessarily a desire for that structure, but there was a desire to consider maybe having a caretaker maintained at that site. Due to the location and the scope of work on Phase 1, staff recommends including the removal of the caretaker cottage in the scope of this phase. Adding the removal of the caretaker cottage to Phase 1 provides for the elimination of blight, reduces the ongoing maintenance efforts to protect the structure from further degradation, and creates the opportunity for revisioning of this space during a future phase. So that's the historical evaluation of the caretaker cottage and some of the reasons that we're looking at demolition. The new restroom facility location, as we had mentioned earlier, we had an adopted Stowe Grove Park master plan. It's also included as attachment 3 in your staff report, and that included a recommendation to add a new ADA restroom facility to be located near the new Universal Playground, which is on the south end of the park. The existing conceptual diagram places the restroom in the middle of the park, which is in front of view of the Redwood Grove. So on the conceptual plan, great location. As we walk out there and start looking at the placement of everything else and actually sitting in spaces, it was easily identified that this is going to obstruct the beautiful view of the Redwood Groves. In December, at Council's direction to engage the public as well as the Commission's request, in December of 2024, we held a public workshop at La Patera School on a Saturday morning and asked the public which location they preferred. The one in the conceptual plan near the Redwood Grove, or shifting it to the west to nestle next to the maintenance yard fence. Those examples that were of the exhibits that were presented are included in your staff report as attachment 4. The overwhelming public response was to move the restroom to the alternate location. So relocating the structure does fall within the environmentally sensitive habitat ESHA buffer zone, which is 100 feet from the drip line of the eucalyptus tree that serve as a windrow on La Patera Drive. During construction, to mitigate any of the potential impacts, the project does have the approved CEQA document that references and a variety of measures that would include inspection, surveys, monitoring of bird and monarch butterfly activity in and around the park, not just within that ESHA buffer zone. Additionally, staff recommends the project include a prefabricated structure, which is similar to those at Johnny D. Wallace Neighborhood Park. And an example of the one we're looking at is also included in attachment 4 with the layout. This option provides opportunities to significantly reduce the impacts of construction within the ESHA buffer, as construction would be limited to demolition, excavation, and utility relocation. The building is constructed off-site, delivered to Goleta, and placed in its new location, and then the remaining of the work is completed at within the building. Again, we're looking for policy direction from council. We're looking for you to tell us, do you want us to move the bathroom? If so, we'll do any necessary paperwork and follow up with any necessary CEQA documents that could or would be relevant in these cases. And that's all I have for you, and I am available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Smith.
I have one question. I don't know if we have any sense yet of, in terms of any mitigation that may be required for the change of the restroom location. I mean, sounds like mitigation was already going to be required in either location. So I didn't know if that would impact the timeline for construction, or if it's too early to say.
With the direction, thank you, Councilmember Smith. With the direction from council this evening, staff will be working on two roads. The one road would be to complete the construction documents with the direction given by council. The other road is to work with Rincon to do a biological study to see if there is any other considerations that would have to take place. I don't foresee any delay. The roads would be running simultaneous, and it would be our intent to bring that any relative CEQA documents or additional mitigations to council prior to us coming to you to accept the plans and go out to bid.
Great, thank you.
Council, any other questions? Okay, well, maybe go to, Councilmember Carriaco, and then we'll go to the public if we have no more questions.
Yeah, so my question is, how far into the ESHA buffer does the alternative restroom location fall? Is it 50 feet, 75 feet, 25 feet?
Thank you, Councilmember Kiriakou. We are looking at placing it outside a 50-foot ESHA buffer, and so potentially the consideration to reduce the ESHA buffer in that area to 50 feet, which is allowable by our municipal code. When the eucalyptus trees are not likely to serve as an aggregation site and are working as a windrow, there is section C.2 within that area of the zoning code does allow for council to consider that. So we would be looking to stay right outside that 50 feet.
Has staff given any consideration to whether or not this establishes a precedent in terms of going inside that 100 feet? Because we have other people that are going to want to come to us, and they're going to want us to push the boundary too.
Councilmember Kiriakou, great question. At this particular park location, there are already a number of structures within that initial buffer. Our whole parking lot is within that ESHA buffer. The caretaker cottage is, the garage is, the maintenance yard is. There's a lot of activity that happens within that ESHA buffer right now. So it's kind of trying to work within that same means, that same footprint. We're not looking at making other considerations outside of that general footprint, and again, trying to push it up against that maintenance yard fence so that those units that we do have out there are all within that same zone.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan?
Yeah, just two things. One is the bathrooms are now going to be located right near the playground, right? So that just on a design basis would seem kind of a better location, I would think. And the other question is, could one construe the fact that by removing the caretaker's cottage from the ESHA, that it acts almost like mitigation for the incursion of the bathroom on ESHA? So one is offset, in other words, by the other. If we were looking, for instance, to justify it to somebody in the future.
Councilmember Kasdan, I would not make that recommendation to you, only because that would limit you for future, and then it would, for any future considerations for the space in which we're taking the caretaker cottage out. But if council came to that determination, then that could make our decision for us for future.
Okey doke. All right, thank you.
Okay, do we have any public speakers?
Yes, any member of the public wishes to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I am seeing none, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Councilmember Reyes-Martin?
Thank you. I wanted to start just by thanking staff. This has been a very deliberative process, and I just really appreciate the time that was taken, not only to do the workshops and really get proactive public input, to go to the Historic Preservation Commission and get their input, to get the report, because there had been comments about, the historic or nostalgic nature of having grown up with that there. So I really appreciate that you took the time to go through all of those steps to get to where we are today. I would say with the relocation of the bathroom, one thing I heard in the workshops was not just that it's a more aesthetically pleasing spot location, but also that by moving it over, it gives better line of sight all the way down kind of that corridor. I heard that from several different parents who said, well, I actually prefer this from a safety standpoint, that I can see, who's coming. Or if my kid, runs off, I can see where they're going. So I think there's multiple things that make the location better. I appreciate the comment about are we setting precedent, but I still think that each situation, each project has unique characteristics and factors that we take into account. So I don't necessarily think it's always apples to apples when we have this question come up. And I think there is a great public benefit that is achieved with so much of this project. So I also had a little bit of the question about like if we proceed tonight, where are we on the overall timeline of the project? I know folks are really eager to see some of the things come to fruition. But I do just want to thank staff. I'm supportive of what you have proposed tonight, and so much of that is because of the very deliberate process that you took to get here.
Thank you, Councilmember Reyes-Martin. I will share that we've gotten through our first round of plan review internally, and they're working on that second round. And after our second round, we'll tighten it up, run it through the building department, and then have our final plans. We're hoping to go to bid, or at least come to you by the end of the year. We're still trying to calculate how long it will take. And while I had talked about the two different roads for just this project, we're also working on the deed for the Stowe family and working on their water line and organizing their water line along with this construction project to lessen the impact to the residents in that area. So we have a lot of wheels turning just on this project alone. So the timing is crucial as well. The grant that we do have has an expiration of December of 2026 based on the documents that we originally signed. And then, which means we need to be open to the public about 3 months prior, which would be September. And so our work needs to be cleaned, everything reported, and the park open a year from now, which is very exciting.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I would just certainly concur with the comments made by Councilmember Reyes-Martin. And I wanted to support, there was a note in the staff report that the consultant had recommended the designation of the park as a point of historical interest. And so I wanted to express my support for that process proceeding with our Historic Landmarks Commission. And I also wanted to acknowledge the emotions surrounding the caretaker cottage. When a structure is demolished, it's a permanent change. But in light of the deliberations that have taken place and the thoughtful comments from all of our commissioners, I'm comfortable with the staff recommendation. But what I wanted to suggest was if there's a way, as the city, if there was some signage or historical acknowledgement at the park about the previous existence of the caretaker cottage, maybe through signage or some other way that parks experts could suggest. But that might be a way, I think, to honor that history, and to preserve it in a different way. I realize it's not the same, but there might be some creative opportunities there. So I put that out there as a food for thought. I'd welcome any other comments on that point. And I also wanted to commend the staff for the suggestion of the modular building for the restroom. I think that's a good way to avoid some of the potential environmental impacts that may come from that process. So I am supportive of the staff recommendations.
Councilmember Kiriakou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also support staff recommendation. I think staff did a really good job in answering our questions tonight, and ultimately I'm persuaded that even though we are intruding on the buffer with this project, at the end of the day, this is just how this park has grown and evolved. Once upon a time, this was the picnic ground for the Stowe family, and where they'd hang out until they heard the dinner bell from way on down at Stowe House to get on their horses and ride back home for the evening. So the park has changed, the space has changed, and the way it's changed has put us in this position where we're in the buffer no matter what, with a variety of functions. So I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable here. As Councilmember Reyes-Martin said, every situation is different, and I agree that this is a different situation. I also appreciate the mention of the mitigations that are being put into place. I appreciated Councilmember Smith touching on the modular building and that being a mitigation as well. And I also think it'll ultimately lead to a good structure. We've seen it work at Johnny Wallace Park with some of the structures that we have there, so we know it can work. We know it can work well. And at the end of the day, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that just because we're not so much losing a historic landmark as a perhaps nostalgia landmark, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're continuing the useful life, the purposeful life, and the enhanced life of this park. And it's ultimately going to serve our community in ways that are easy to foresee and not always easy to foresee. And it's going to be a little bit safer, it's going to be a little bit prettier, and it's going to be a lot more accessible. So I'm really excited for this.
I'm going to jump in real quick. What impressed me the most about the whole discussion of Stowe Grove Park was the fact that it had from the very beginning, it had so many people interested in being part of the discussion, more so than a lot of other projects for us, right? Am I right? The surveys and...
Mayor, you are correct. I believe Stowe Grove Park still holds the title of the most survey responses. So, I keep track because I'm competitive.
I had folks calling me saying, I don't live in Goleta, but we use that park and we love it so much. Can we participate in this survey? And I'm like, absolutely. So I think staff, for all along, you've worked really hard to work with the public, to hear what they had. And I think the bottom line is they said, what are we trying to fix? And what we're doing is making it more accessible and functional, and the restroom, the location, moving it, as a parent, I can understand, sight, vision, and moving it to where it is, it's closer to the playground. I think we've listened to the community and not making it something it's not. I look forward to this process. This is phase 1, yes? And then moving on. But I think I support everything, and I agree with my colleagues that this is, ESHAs are always a little tough for me, but we've already encroached in a lot of, ESHAs there, and I think in the long run this is a better place for it. And I did listen to the Parks and Recreation meeting and Historical Preservation, and they did an excellent job of asking good questions and really thinking this through. So I appreciate the effort and the extra work that staff put into this to make sure everybody was heard. So thank you. And I will be agreeing with everything that you've suggested. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just as an observation. So I respect what you had said about not tying our hands with respect to the mitigation, but at least conceptually, that is, we are increasing, while we are moving the bathroom into an area that is officially ESHA, we are expanding the overall amount of ESHA, even if we're not formally doing it. And by removing the caretaker's cottage, we are increasing the area for play. There is more park available for the users, and it's going to be, I just commend you, it's going to be very exciting because there's so many different things that are in the park. Anyway, I won't go on with it, but it's going to be exciting, and so I look forward to it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I wanted to share with you that regarding Councilmember Smith's support of the historic point of interest, I wanted to share at the Historic Preservation Commission, one of the commissioners had asked staff to bring that item back to them. So I know that our planning department will be working on that. And then the project overall does include a lot of interpretive signs. And so we'll have some related to the cultural impacts that the Chumash had on that site. We'll have some related to all of the native landscaping, the redwoods, obviously. But we've also asked the Stowe family and the Stowe company to come up with some fun facts about the family and how they use the site, and some just in my communications with Zach Rissel, he shares some stories just like we're sitting at his Thanksgiving dinner table, and it's just fabulous, and you just can see it in your head, and it's a lot of fun. So absolutely showing the change in times. You don't just ride your horse down to a picnic during the day, or rent it out to your friends for the cost of 2 dinners that night for you and your wife, or you don't necessarily have a caretaker there anymore. So as the times change and shift, it's very important for us to remember what has happened, what has taken place at that location. It's such a beautiful location, has such a rich history, and has such a great cultural relevance and native relevance, or natural relevance in our community. So we will be definitely putting in some interpretive signs throughout each phase, and phase 1 will be the first step, and in those key locations, we'll have some of those signs.
Thank you. Any more comments? If not, we can make.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And just to clarify, and with the fun facts, there's contemplation that a reference to the caretaker's cottage would be within that. Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
Do we have a motion? I think it requires.
I'm happy to make the motion.
Is there?
Oh, do we do public comment?
I think there.
There is no public.
We did that, yeah.
Okay.
And Mayor, we do have, for staff's recommendation, two action items on the agenda.
Okay. Oops.
There's A and B, right? So I move we support the recommendation to include the demolition of the caretaker cottage in phase 1 construction of the Stowe Grove Master Plan project. And B, support the recommendation to relocate the prefabricated new restroom facility within the environmentally sensitive habitat area buffer zone.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, council members, do lock in your votes. Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Carriaco,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith, Mayor
Yes.
Pro Tempore Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Perotti.
Aye. Ayes have it. Okay. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There you go. All right. Do we have any council comments or committee meetings that you want to talk about? I don't see anything written down, and nope, not seeing anything. Any announcements? Nope. Okay. Lemon Festival. Yes, definitely. Okay. Mr. Rosen, do you have anything you'd like to say?
And none for me tonight, Mayor.
Okay, then I think this meeting is adjourned. Wow.